when you get ready.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings. Welcome to the open forum hosted by three heads of state. I myself, Akil Bey, head of state from Meru State Republic, um, as well as two other heads of state, Kendon Bey of DMT and Amir L of New Mecca. If you all would like to introduce yourself, feel free to do so. But before we do so, I like to before I yield the floor to the two others briefly, I like to explain what this is. This is an open forum where we're trying to uh, have a pattern of when we'll be hosting these videos and open forums. So this is a link that you can save as a reoccurring link. That way you can always have it. So I'll yield the floor to the Vice President or Wazir Kendon or Wazir Mir if you're on.
Islam. I'm glad everyone can come. Um, as she's asking questions, I can kind of understand some of the concepts. She doesn't understand, and that's fine. And I'm glad you came. Gonna try to make sense of some of the concepts like any of the processes before we came into statehood. Why we're using those processes? Because we were colonized. That's what we're done to us. To even have to come to that. And to decolonize, it takes the United Nations. You can't just come together and you know who you are, and you don't have the proper tools to get the remedy, that we say that we want. Man, you're not supposed to be messing with me. Okay, well, what does that look manifested? And that's just basically, what we're just trying to get out there, period. If a person wants to be an American, fine. But don't act like you're not something else when you're acting like something else. But with that, I yield, and I'm just ready for us to start. It's gonna be kind of good. Me and the president, we talked earlier about a lot of different concepts. I don't know, if all the documents we looked at, we'll be able to pull up, but just some of them, so you can get the concept and see how they're talking about colonization, how they're talking about status, how they're talking about if these, not quote unquote just these Moors, but if these particular indigenous people come back in to land, like damn, like where they put us in, right? Because I know they want to do us bad, and you hear them talking like that, and you start to understand more of what's going on involving the United Nations. But with that, I yield.
Point of privilege. Is Amir going to go next? I'll wait.
I'm not sure if Amir is on. Let's
Okay.
see. Yeah, he's not on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Executive Director.
Okay. Greetings, everybody. I wanted to answer the question for Sister Brooks L, where she had asked a question about how do you become a Moroccan state? The process of becoming a Moroccan state is you have to gather a group of people, but at least 3 individuals that can place themselves in the 3 branches of government. So you need your legislative branch, which has to be a woman, a matriarch, and she needs to be a matrilineal, meaning that both parents are from a Moorish background. And then you have to have a chief qazi and a wazir just to be able to start a state. So you have to have your 3 branches of government. But first thing you need to do is write a Declaration of Independence. That's signed by we the people. You may not even have a seal, a flag, or any of that yet, but a Declaration of Independence can be drafted years before you actually are recognized as a Moroccan state. Just the same thing happened with the United States. They waited years before their constitution, and the Sultan even recognized them. So once you have your 3 groups, we at the WRC now consider your group, a political group that's forming. You're not a true Moroccan state yet, but what we're going to do, if you're planning on petitioning to go through the Wazir Regional Council for support through the process, which you should, we're going to categorize you as a political group forming, and then from there, you have to check many boxes to get yourself to the process of being a recognized state and also a member of the WRC. So you have to have a seal, a flag, a Declaration of Independence, a constitution. You have to have elections. You need to have an inauguration. Once you've completed an inauguration, then you've got to promulgate that. You've got to let the world know publicly. That can be done on a website. It can be done on a Facebook page. You also need to deposit all of those documents with the United Nations. Once you deposit them with the United Nations, you also have to turn around and notify the United States, its federal agents, and the local municipalities of your state, your governor, your secretary of state of your state, the one that you're decolonizing, as well as your attorney general. And of course, if you want to notify mayors, you can do that, but there are many mayors for many different counties, so you don't need to do that. We have a list of federal agents you need to send it to and the state agents that you need to send it to. Once you've completed that, the objective and goal is also to get you to become a recognized state. So you have to complete a list of accessions, meaning that there are treaties, there are resolutions, and there are statutes that are provided on the United Nations website for all states to adhere to accept. If you're going to call yourself a state, you have to act like a state and practice being a state, which means you have to accept those resolutions and the Charter of the United Nations. Because if you're not a party to those, like crimes against genocide, crimes and punishment for crimes against genocide, those types of things, or Declaration of Human Rights, then you can't enforce them. So you have to know that you've got to be studying the treaties and the Barbary treaties, which are all the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, the Treaty of Madrid, and the Act of Algeciras. So we teach you and provide a list of all the treaties that you must adhere to so that you can be in conformity with all the other Moroccan states. Once you get through with that, you then have to deposit them with the United Nations, and you have to also pass them into internal law. So you create that in your internal law, meaning that you're accepting the United Nations Charter exactly the way it is as an internal law, meaning your state accepts it. Now, we all know that the United States accepted the rights of indigenous people, but they never passed it in they never signed off on it here. They only acceded to it on an international level, but your state has to accept it in it as its internal law. So you're going to pass a bill that says you're accepting all of those, not just telling the United Nations that you're accepting it on the international level. You have to also bring it back into your state level. We also provide you documentation so that you go through the process of correctly nationalizing your people. So you have to pass 2 laws immediately right off the bat. And they have to sign a renunciation document and an affirmation document. Obviously, a renunciation document is saying that I don't want to be a part of the United States. I don't want to be naturalized anymore. The other one is I want to be a Moroccan, and now I'm affirming my allegiance. I'm returning to the empire. So those 2 forms have to be completed for everybody who comes into statehood, not just a government official. Once you come in and you provided your documentation for accessions and you pass those into laws, then we'll petition the WRC to do an audit on all of your paperwork to make sure you did it right. And obviously these gentlemen that are on the call, Akil and Kendon, are the president and the vice president of the Trusteeship Council, and they oversee all the other members. Their job is to assist these new political groups forming with checking all the boxes, making sure they get it done correctly. Then my job is to make sure that each and every one of them who has completed the boxes, I go through and I check every one of them diligently. I'm looking to see, did you guys cross your I's and dot your T's? And if you didn't, we're going to help you fix it. Because we all look good together or we all look bad together. And I cannot let you miss something, because if you miss something, then you might not be able to be a party to that particular treaty. And then you won't be included in our class action lawsuit. So the ultimate goal is that we all have done the same thing with following the same steps, so that there's no misunderstanding as to whether or not you did it. And we are checking everything to see that you did it. We're helping you because we're providing model instruments for those. Then when we finally get to the point where we vote to bring you as a recognized state, all of the states send each other a letter stating, okay, Utah, maybe they decolonize Utah. That state is going to send letters to all the existing states and say, we recognize you. And all the existing states are going to send letters back to the other states saying, we recognize the new state. And that has to happen simultaneously. And when that's complete, then they can petition to become a member of the WRC. And that wazir sits at the round table and he's collectively working with all the other wazirs to make decisions. And he now has a vote in everything that happens along with the empire, with all of the government, with all of the states that are forming policies, resolutions, just like the United Nations does. But we're doing this through a regional agency, an intergovernmental organization that allows all of us to collectively come together and hold each other accountable. We also have a regional Supreme Court with the WRC, and that allows us to settle disputes through mediation. That's if it's state on state disputes. So if we have a problem with another state that is saying, well, why aren't you guys recognizing us? We want to be recognized. And we say, well, you're not fit for recognition, and here's why. And if they still petition and say, well, we don't believe that's accurate, they can come to the RSC and say, well, can you ask the WRC to prove and to justify why they're making this claim? And then, of course, it would be brought to the court so we could decide that. So as far as the WRC and us finally getting to the empire, we have to first pass laws, and that happens as soon as you become a recognized state. We share all the laws that have been written, and there's like 2 years of documentation that we've been writing that we're sharing with states, but only if they go through the proper steps, because we're not going to give our blood, sweat, and tears to individuals who still don't understand statehood and then are not going to represent and protect the people in the proper way, writing laws that don't make sense, being belligerent with, how they're talking against the Americans, or taking money, stealing from people who are trying to become naturalized, or nationals, things like that. We're just not going to tolerate it. So that's pretty much kind of like a quick run through. There's a lot of steps that are involved, but every step along the way, we have provided documentary evidence to support you to make sure it gets done correctly. And there are a group of people. There are 7 wazirs, executive staff, including myself, the Inspector General, at least 4 or 5 others that are assisting on the executive branch level with the Secretariat's office. And I believe there's at least 8 of the trusteeship members. So we're all working collectively to make sure that when we put these processes and procedures together for checking the boxes to holding each of our states accountable, we all have to do the same thing. So we each have a depository inside of a file where your documents are being stored through this whole process, which I have to be able to say, okay, I see their Constitution, I see their Declaration of Independence, I see their flag, their seal. They have a government officials list. They created government official emails. They have an election ballot for everybody that was elected, and all of those that were appointed, they all took an oath and allegiance and affirmation. They did all their documentation that they were supposed to do, and they accepted all the WRC policies. And when that happens, that person, that state is now fully on board. And when they become a recognized state and a member of the WRC, their positions are final at that point. They are no longer de facto. They are recognized wazirs on an international level. The state at that point has the ability to become active members. I'm sorry, active with getting into international relations with other states so they can sign treaties with amongst each other. But the goal is that all the states that come on board with the Moroccan state is to accept the United States of Morocco Constitution. And so that Constitution will be drafted as we are moving through these next 3 to 6 months, so that the contentious disputes that are occurring in each one of the jurisdictions, DIMTY, AMPAG, Meru, AMPAC, our jurisdiction, we have disputes going on with the United States, with the chartered colonies, and we are going through the diplomatic relations of mediation, arbitration, conciliation, before we ever get to adjudication. So we're still in this process of arbitration right now. We're sending letters out. We're getting ready to send out letters that say, okay, we're kind of giving you a little bit of a pushy deadline as to when you must adhere. You have to fix this. You got to leave our national alone. You got to drop the charges, whatever it is, because we all have different issues. But when they decide to not respond, then we send out a deadline that says you must respond. And then when that fails, then they petition the WRC for us to come back to the United States as a joint action, class action lawsuit. We all speak in one voice and we say to all of the states, okay, one crime against one of the states, or a breach of a treaty against one of the states, is a breach against all our treaties. So we all win together or we all lose together. If they still refuse to come into consular court and deal with all of that through our Moroccan courts, then we then take it back to the consular court, where we actually do look for a judgment now. So then the judge will place a judgment against the United States, where it could be fines and penalties and confiscation, where someone can actually be held liable and go to jail for that. And then if they still refuse to surrender or do what they're supposed to do according to these breaches of the treaties, or violations of human rights, or not honoring diplomatic immunity, or whatever those things might be, then we then take it back to our court, well, our group of wazirs, and we start drafting that constitution. That constitution has to be put into place, because if we don't have that, we're not fulfilling the treaty to its fullest strict sense of law. And it already recognizes that there's a sultan, so we have to elect a sultan, and we have to also have a constitution. So we've got to do that to represent all the states at that point. And then if they still don't adhere to the Empire of Morocco's courts, then at that point we go to the ICJ. It's a lot of steps, but these steps are exactly what happens in international law. And no Moorish Americans, no individuals that are going to be selling RB Bay publications, nationality cards, are going to understand this process. They are so far from understanding what it means to really operate like a state, and then to be able to enforce what you would consider an empire court, or any of those things. So all those things will happen, and they're all going to happen within the next 3 to 6 months. And I would say that by the month of June, we'll be electing a sultan. We will have an empire constitution by then, and we will be petitioning the ICJ to take up these cases that we have jointly as a Erga Amas party, so that all the states that are involved at that point will all win together, or we will lose together. But we are not going to lose. We are not going to lose. So with that, I yield the floor. I hope that kind of gives you a little bit more background as to how all this must happen. But anybody can do this. So I would never feel like discouraged that you can or cannot do this. There are all levels of erudition involved in the movement at this point. If you truly understand the mission and the vision of uplifting fallen humanity, if you trust the WRC and you trust the process, you can do this. If you're interested in becoming a member of Moroccan state, at this point, the best way for you to make a difference is to actually work with a group of individuals in a state and decolonize, and then work with the WRC, obviously.
Yes,
And
that answers a lot, and it's a whole lot. So I am in California, and I am working with Wazir Tong Bay. So it just came to
okay,
this is my first meeting, so just trying to get an idea of what's going on. That's all.
nice. Okay, wow. That's my answer, and I'm sure Kendon and Akil can share any more that they would like as well.
I think you broke down a good general concept of what's going on here. I do thank you for that. Again, that's the executive director of the WRC. Does anybody else have any questions or comments before we get started here about anything at all?
Point of privilege,
Yeah.
Brother North Star, Rome. I got in just a minute ago, and I heard enough about some changes that had to be made to represent the empire, or they wanted to go back to the Sultan, and so I want to get some clarity on that. I apologize if you have to repeat that, because I just uh, listening to Noble J say so many times that the Sultan is now the state, and so it's now statehood, and so now the requirement has gone back to, well, in order to replicate what it was before, it has to go back to the Sultan to get to the ICJ. I think that's what I heard. Please give me some clarification. I yield.
Yeah, that's correct. As far as you stated, Brother J. Bay has stated much about the previous sultans, and that yes, you're correct. The states are the sultan as of right now, but that's as of right now. Starting off, the first thing would be to establish the state, and then the central government, or the United States of Morocco, is forming. In addition to that, a sultan. So, those are just two of the key main parts that's needed. Simply because the treaties already have established these seats of offices and avenues. So it's pretty much up to us as states to let the world know what these seats of offices look like, etc. So as of right now, no, there's no sultan, and it is up to the states, as it always will be up to the states. We're all in this as erga omnes parties, forming the United States of Morocco. So it's always going to be a balance of powers. Even with the sultan, that just means that we have states, and we all have equal opportunities to exercise these laws. So did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, it helped. It helped. It helped. It didn't clear up my perplexities, because Noble J had pounded the drum on that. It's like those days are over, and they're dead, they're gone, and so you kind of like riding with that, because that's the monarchy is where a lot of the errors were made, and allowing a portal for us to be conquered. And so to hear that they want to have, they need that in order to fit the rubric of the treaties, to be adjudicated, to adjudicate. It's a little perplexing, but I think I understand that we are going to still be on the equality. Equality is the mission, and if there is a Sultan that's elected, it would be one, that is, which was what it was in the beginning for monarchy. People elected them. They were for the people, by the people, and it would be that again, something that would sit and stand for the principles, the three principles. I yield.
Yeah. Now, do you?
Point of privilege. You're right that he would be an elected official at that point. He would be elected for a term that would have a start and an end. So that would be the difference between a sultan prior before, where it was all based off of, like you say, a monarchy, where it transfers from one generation to the next within a certain bloodline or family heritage. That's not happening. So it would be an elected position, just like you said, for the people, by the people, voting for that individual. So you're right.
Ashe.
And just to add on to that, Campbell, back onto that, as far as the monarchy and all of that, we can learn from the previous experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for us to, especially as of right now, we have to create the avenue for the Sultan. There has to be a lot of things set up as far as what that seat of office will look like, and there's no Sultan right now to establish what that looks like. So it's up to the states, and the states are all looking at this like we're all in this together. So as the seat of office, that whole avenue is being established. Again, this is always going to be back to the balance of powers, mainly because we learned from before, in which we got to take into account what this seat of office will look like today.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll yield to any other questions or comments before we get started here. If anybody has any at all.
Oh, I got something up here. Peace and love to the chat person. When you send your paperwork to the United Nations, I heard this being mentioned. Do the United Nations, when the paperwork goes in, say, hey, this state right here said they have been colonized, and as we go through the process, what do they give back to the state that you're colonized, to those officials that say, hey, this state right here, these lords right here saying that they want to become independent. They are no longer must be part of your jurisdiction. Do they give any, I would say, notification to that state to say anything to let them know that they are coming up here to, be decolonized from where they once were? Do they do anything besides what we're doing? But it seems like after we give our paperwork, putting you in.
Excuse me, not to cut you off, but if you can come to the mic a little closer or speak a little clearer, it's kind of hard to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, way better.
Okay. No, what I was saying was that once you send your paperwork to the UN, do they send anything back to the states, to your state, and say, hey, these Moors are wants to be recognized as their own independent state? Do they give the notification to the officials that's there, or is it strictly just us putting all the paperwork? Because that's what it seems like. We are doing everything, but we just letting them know, hey, this is where we're going with it. So is there anything that we do? I mean, do they do?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Chris.
go ahead, Vice President.
Well, like you got to understand the concept. You know, the United Nations, it can't recognize a state, so you know you're just basically giving notice. But you got to really understand that sometimes you know, not understanding that concept, you be seeking recognition from something that doesn't have the authority to recognize. You know what I'm saying? So you'll really be waiting for something that's really inevitable to happen. So you got to recognize yourself, and when you recognize yourself through certain actions, then the mechanism starts happening. But it's just not going to happen in a way that you just like it's going to be on the news or you know it doesn't work like that. It's so big. But just to answer your question, no, the United Nations they can't recognize you and give you the authority to make you feel like a state. Only another state can do that. But that I yield.
Yeah. And in addition to that, you know, not only can the United Nations not recognize a state as they are not a state themselves, but one of the primary functions of the United Nations is to notify all other governments in relation to our status. So in you know the beginning states, the first few Moroccan states can attest to sending off documentation to only a few places, such as the United Nations being one of them, two other places after that, opposed to now there's several other places that we send off documentation to. So I say that to say, notifying the Secretary General with the few notices, which were 3 in total, at first for us. Remember, they didn't notify all the other states, right? So with us notifying just those 3, there was clear indication that states began to be seen as states throughout time, basically. So that gives clear indication that somebody is doing something. Otherwise, they wouldn't adhere to these consular court documents in any type of way. So somewhere along that line, though we know colonization is everywhere, right? Colonization happens, you know, throughout the entire world on many different levels. Nonetheless, they're being adhered to, the consular courts, to some degree. So that gives you an indication that, quote unquote, it's happening like a thief in the night, right? Like a Wazir or Vice President Kendon said, it's not going to be on TV or anything of that nature as of yet. But it is going to be a way that we'll have to basically study international law in the areas that it not only needs to be studied, but it needs to be cleaned up. And by cleaned up, I mean enforced, activated by who? Moors that can only do it through their Moor states, such as the Moors on this landmass. So it's only so much the world can understand if international law at its core is not fully or thoroughly understood, because we have not came online to teach the world. So I say that to say that not only your point or your question is in regards to us basically reteaching the world again, but also in relation to me saying that as we teach the world is going to realize how much it didn't know, how much it could have did better. in further meetings, we'll even discuss more about the Trusteeship Council of the United Nations, and some of the history in regards to the colonial states, how they operated. There was one book that the vice president and I were reading a few days ago, or currently reading, and it speaks on why and how some of the colonial powers, most of the colonial powers, who are a part of the United Nations, how they targeted specific things. And this was a certain trusteeship council. This is a particular trusteeship council member, former trusteeship council member of the United Nations, who was from Britain, saying this. So there's a specific light that has come forth now to say, hey, all it takes is for us to study where the limitation stops and how does it continue, because it's really solely fixed around the Moroccan Empire in all truth, in some way or another, because the whole world is Morocco. And once we understand that underlying denominator, you'll be able to see that in various ways. So just to come back to the point, or the question, it takes it takes us studying. I say one example before I conclude this answer here. One example of how we can begin to reassure that files are being filed, and everything is in cahoots. Not only do we have indication that our constant court orders are being adhered to, so obviously somebody did something, but in addition to that, we must not reinvent the wheel, right? Mimic government. So we created our trusteeship council of the WRC, right? Which mimics the United Nations. In doing that, we studied things like the United Nations Charter, and see where things could open up for us as we not reinvent the wheel. But again, if we put word for word, then we're no better than the colonizers. So we have to think for ourselves at that moment, where do things have to change, even though there's no need to reinvent the wheel? So Article 2, Section 7 of the United Nations Charter, as I conclude with this point, we'll be talking about that in further future meetings, especially as it relates to colonial powers, and their intent to assist indigenous peoples in the rights of self-determination. Because Article 2, Section 7, it can contradict with other areas of that charter, in which we'll speak about. There other people have spoken about. So we'll talk more about that when we get to those actual points. But there are ways to reinsure everything, but it takes studying international law to see what it takes and who will they listen to when we do say it. So did that answer your question at all? Or did I need to elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, it did. I just wanted to. Yeah, it did pretty much, because I know when we talk about United Nations a lot of it, as far as what they do, as far as decolonization, I just had thoughts and questions on, if you come to them, what do they, and I say, not to say they recognize us, but just letting the states know these Moors are saying, hey, they're trying to be decolonized from your jurisdiction. And I was just thinking that they put the states on notice to say, hey, this is who's coming. This is who want their independence. That's what I thought. I didn't think I never had a thought that that they recognized us. But I'm just saying, like, since we have to go through them in order for it to be decolonized, I thought that they give notice to the officials of that state to say, hey, they are saying that you're doing this. So that's what I thought. So, but pretty much
That's
everything else I just explained, yeah, I get that.
point of privilege. It's
Yeah.
not like going through them. It's demanding that they sign relinquished territory. Correct?
Yeah, point of privilege. You can look at it like this. When you send that notice to them, basically what you're telling them, okay, I'm ready to come back into self-governance and the administrators of that territory, you all need to try to start setting up some type of mediation, because the proper authority is here with the privileged and immunities to enforce these laws. And that's basically what that is. And right then, from that time, they have they can try to address it immediately, or they can start, deny, and defend, and, create acts of genocide, aggression, and so forth and so on. But it just basically let them know, okay, we have a new player in the game. So that's basically what it is. But it's not seeking no approval or anything. It's just part of the process to become, a state, or to play in the international law, realm. With that, I yield.
Right. So
May I? May I?
Yeah,
We're
go
not
ahead.
new. Are we seriously new players in the game? Are we the descendants of the old players? Somebody help me out on that one. I like
We
what
the
he had to
sideburns,
say,
I'll
but
say
you
that.
know what? I'm not trying to tell somebody, yeah, I'm the new kid on the block. That's that group from wherever they're from. They were cute and everything back in the day. But I'm a descendant of the ancient Moabites, and this is our land, and it's about time. I've been around all the various ones. I've gotten some feedback from some people, when you mention certain names. Oh, that's old school, but you know what? Even some of the young bucks that would say something about Noble Drew Ali, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the old bucks. So let's always give some type of honor to the others. I have a 92-year-old father. I just left him in the hospital, and I'm right here now getting ready to step into my mother's place, and she's 88. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them, and they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their parents, right? My grandparents, and so on and so on. So are we? I like what you just said, young brother. I just want to know, are we the new kids on the block, or are we just simply, our ancestors reincarnated, and we, just a sleeping giant? We here. We here. I
point
ain't
of
going
privilege.
nowhere. I'm not going anywhere. Trust and believe that. I've been waiting for these days, and I've been studying, with the many more around the country, and I'm glad to, be here. I'm here in I guess the territory they call New Jersey. But somebody help me out on that. We're not the new kids on the block.
Shit.
Hey,
Point
North
of
Star.
privilege.
Hey, how you doing, Elisa?
Hi,
Islam.
baby.
Islam.
Islam.
Well, far as the new kids on the block, when it comes to decolonization, we're not the first ones to actually do it. We're just the first ones over here in this hemisphere. But in over here, yes, we are the new kids on the block. When you think of Africa has, I believe it's 50 some states that already been decolonized. Decolonized. It's not like us, but they already been on this road. Mexico, they already been on this road when we've been looking for civil rights, and we're just seeing, well, man, they're fighting over this border wall, or and that's all we're looking. We're not really knowing the reality of what's going on. But so, yeah, basically, we are the new kids on the block. But this is Moroccan law, and it originated from us. So we just had to come back into the consciousness to enforce it. But that I yield.
Point
Okay,
of
thank you, Akil. My battery's getting ready to go, so unfortunately it's going to drop out, and then as soon as I get inside, I'll come back on.
point of privilege. So I'm looking at the law is our shield and the pen is our sword. And what the law says, which is the law of the land, what we're working with is post-millennium, that they to help us at various stages of our advancement, and that just has to be written in a way that they cannot deny, they cannot stall, and they cannot defend. You know, and that's going to be the journey. That's going to be the task, and of course, um, that's all they know is stall, deny, and defend, because they have nowhere to go, and it, they've been operating fear based. They're a fear based. They're a fear based group of people, um, which is why they do what they do anyway. You know, and so. Their days is numbered. There was you're talking about the totalitarian tiptoe. Um, there's a whole new millennium that's tiptoeing in on them. We're in the age of Aquarius, and um, there's nothing they can do about. There's nothing they can do about it. The serpents, the dragon's tail will swing, and it'll try and destroy as much as it can before it dies, but it's going to die. Piscean energy cannot survive in the Aquarian age. It just can't. So we got more on our side than just the law of the land. We've got ancestors and universal laws working on our behalf as well. I yield.
On the privilege,
Okay.
to my understanding, you know, the way our ancestors did things, they demanded things because we're not subordinate in any treaty. We are superior. And as far as them going somewhere, we don't want them to go back to Europe and Britain because we need to charge them taxes. Yeah, we definitely. I yield.
Yeah, that's a good point. All good points being brought up. As it'll take us directions in which we can further expound on after we get into the few of these screen shares or screenshots from this book. So if you have any other questions or comments, please reserve it till after we get this the study session started. You know, write it down or do what you got to do. But we'll open the floor up at the end for any other questions or comments. All right. So to start off, I like to first say that, again, this will be a reoccurring link. Be sure to save it. But as we open up with this study session, I like to first expound on what's on the screen here, the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, a commentary. Okay, this is a commentary on this specific convention. All right. We'll go through several screen shares or screenshots. And this will basically be what we'll be talking about for the next few meetings. So this is nothing that will, especially after having the floor open for about an hour, this is nothing we'll finish tonight. And I won't say anytime soon, really, but because it really needs to be studied that thorough, especially for the people who are starting states, just finding out about things. This is one of the better documents to start off with. coming out of the quote unquote Moorish American mentality, you know so much about treaties and conventions and whatnot, but this is a convention that not a lot of Moorish Americans know of, or at least speak on. Reason being is because the Moorish American teachers didn't want us to know about these types of documents and how to actually bind to a treaty, how to actually exercise a treaty, what laws actually govern a treaty, in which this convention expounds on. All right, so this is a convention on the law of all treaties, right? So regardless of what anybody says, any Moorish American to tell you that this is how this works as far as the treaty XYZ, well, we got commentary based on this convention, right? And also, because some people like to say, well, it's a commentary. Well, you can go straight to the convention, read the strict sense yourself, just as this book is going to take every strict sense of uh, any word that's necessary and expound on it. All right, so that's one reason why we're getting into this book. So we'll start this after let's see here, after I get to share this. All right, so not only are we going to be talking about VCLT or the Vienna Convention Law Treaty, but I also thought that it would be necessary to speak on nationality, what we call nationality. Now, this word is similar to nation, right? Just as many of us know and are aware of, but some of us are not aware of that nationality is sometimes interchangeably used with citizenship. So I would like to expound on the differences, yet the sameness, how they are interconnected, and why some of the Moorish Americans have a hard time understanding Moorish statehood. All right, so if I can get someone to read here, a volunteer to read what's on the screen, I appreciate that. If anybody would like to volunteer.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Vice President. Can you see it?
Yeah, just a minute.
Okay.
Hey, Kill, let somebody else read.
Okay. Is there anybody else who can volunteer to read?
I got you.
All right, thank you.
Let's see. Main differences between national and citizen. Generally, people consider the term national as a synonym for the term citizen, and vice versa. However, the two terms have different meaning. The main difference between national and citizen is that nationality relates to the place you are born, and citizenship relates to title given to you by the government of state after you fulfill the legal formalities.
All right,
National.
real quick. All right. So just based off of that, before we continue any further, a lot of us are familiar with what Noble Drew Ali said. Is one of his oral quotes. Moroccans born in America, right? Us being Moroccans born in America, right? Now, when we see here this term born, right, it says nationality relates to a place you are born. Okay, Noble Drew Ali said we were born in America, even though he knew that this was the Moroccan Empire, right? So nationality relates to the place you are born. Okay, so one of the reasons why we're breaking this down, why we're going to break this down, is because some Moors believe that they're Americans. Some Moors believe they're Moroccan Americans, et cetera, et cetera. But this because there's no clear distinction. You know, when people say, "Hey, are we citizens of the United States of America or not?" You know, some more say yes, some more say no. Well, as we weigh this out, we'll see what this side says and what this side says and what the truth says. Right? So it says nationality relates to the place you are born. Right? So we're born, quote unquote, in America. Right? Born means naturalized. Okay, so naturalized in America. Basically, what that's saying here, right? Moroccans were naturalized or born in America, and citizenship relates to the given to you by the government of a state after you fulfill the legal formality. Okay, well, none of us went up to the United States and said, "Hey, I pledge of allegiance." Have we? No, not to my. Excuse me if I'm wrong. Anybody can cut me off at any time if it has. But citizenship relates to the title given to you by the government. Okay, where was the Moroccan government at the time you were born in America? Where was the Moroccan government? Well, it existed. So who validates, confirms you being a national if that government confirm or validate you being a national, because there's nobody in that government? Nobody. So guess who had to do it? Somebody. And that somebody is according to treaties. So who do we all see here today acting as a de facto of the United States of America? So though we never pledged allegiance to the United States, you know, went up in front of the judge and all of that, there's a lot of things that must be taken in consideration as to why more subjects are under the jurisdiction of the United States of America. Okay, so we'll be expounding on that further, with this just being one of the points. Okay, Brother North Star, if you can continue the reading, please. Brother North Star, you there?
I'm sorry, I was reading and I was on mute. Yes.
Okay.
National. The term national relates to where you were born. You automatically become a national by being born in that country. The nationality has to do with the relationship you have with your place of birth and is frequently viewed as racially or ethnically linked. Your nationality cannot be changed because it is innate.
Okay.
Citizen. You want me to stop or?
No, keep going.
Okay. Citizen. The term citizen is related to the title given by the government of a state to you after you fulfill the required legal formalities. You can become a citizen through marriage. inheritance, birth, registration, and naturalization. Thus, citizenship can be viewed as a political status in many aspects, because it represents which country acknowledges you as a citizen. Citizenship can change as you can be a citizen of numerous countries at the same time, as well as being able to give up your citizenship to a country.
All right. So let's look back in the snap section, where it says your nationality cannot be changed because it is in it, right? It also says it's dependent upon the place you were born. Okay, so we know that nationality is something that's in it and cannot be changed, unlike citizenship. So this gives further clarity on Moroccan states actually enabling one person to be known or be seen as a Moroccan national. Because a lot of Moors say, hey, I'm Moroccan national, but national means to pledge allegiance to a state. So, or a state government specifically, right? So, since a lot of Moors haven't done that, we have to take into consideration what citizen is, right? We have to understand that term while we say national or nationality. So it says that the term citizen is related to the title given by the government of a state. Okay, so the government is the machinery organization or the machinery mechanism of the state. Okay, even though state and government is synonymously used, there's also differences between that. And we read that it says given by the government of a state to you after you fulfill the required legal formalities. Okay. Some of us have heard of so then it goes right quick. You can become a through marriage, inheritance, birth, registration, and naturalization. Moroccans born in America, right? So why are more subjects seen as citizens of the United States of America? Well, it's because we have yet to meet the requirements to not be seen as some of us have yet to meet the requirements to not be seen as the United States. So therefore, simply solely based off of that, you are a citizen. More so because the France of the United States of America court case was an international court case, 1952, which said that more are under the jurisdiction of the United States of America until the Moroccan states are established. So, in so many words. So, citizenship, right? Some of us heard of dual citizenship, right? Dual. Now, if citizen and national or citizenship and nationality are different yet are used interchangeably most times, how many times have we heard the term dual it's more properly considered dual citizenship, right? So when we say citizenship, not only is it different than nationality, understand how it's the same. Okay, so we'll also break down in further meetings about this. But I also like to bring up some screenshots in relation to the same thing before we get into this Vienna Convention Law on Treaties. But I will say, as I look at this, that nationality is a broader concept than citizenship. Nationality relates to, just as it says, let's read right here. Nationality refers to belonging to a group having the same culture, traditions, history, and language. On the other hand, citizenship may not refer to people of the same group. So nationality can be applied to a country where an individual was born. Citizenship is a legal status, which means to an individual has been registered, that an individual has been registered with the government in the same country. So remember, country is synonymous with state. Country means state, right? So for example, an Indian born has got an Indian nationality, but he could be a U.S. citizen as well. Okay. So one of the points that more than likely will be spoken about as the states progress is that some of our own people won't be considered Moorish nationals. They won't be accepted into the Moorish states. Now, let's ask ourselves, why won't they be accepted? Why won't they be accepted? Because a lot of people say, okay, I don't know why that keeps happening. A lot of people like to say, a lot of people like to say, we have a right to nationality, which you do, right? And as we understand citizenship, excuse me, I'm not sure why I keep doing that. As we understand citizenship, will even further explain why the more states won't accept everybody, because does any state government accept everybody and anybody for any reason? No. States tend to deny citizens, or people, I should say, for various reasons, right? So if nationality and citizenship can be interchangeably used, let's ask ourselves again, when we ask ourselves, why won't our own people be accepted? Well, we got several different types of Moors and mentality. That we realize, right? There's a lot of people that want to, they are seeking asylum, right? Mm-hmm. Some have committed a murder, some may have be rapists, et cetera, right? These are things that obviously the Moroccan states are looking out for, just as any state is looking out for. And this will determine, and not only just that, but, as they are being interviewed, going through several tests, just as any person would, becoming a part of state government, right? It's just not a one thing that you do. This will determine whether you'll be accepted into that Moroccan state. So though Moors do have a right to nationality, it's important to know that that state, which is seen as a person, has the right to contract with you itself and to make you a national of that state, right? So all persons have the right to contract, which includes contracting the Moors as a Moorish national. If we see it fit, then yes. If not, of course not. So I'd like to share this next slide. Citizenship, just to further expound on it. We'll briefly go through these. Citizenship, nationality. Citizenship is membership in a democratic or political community, whereas nationality is membership in any political community, whether monarchical, autocratic, or democratic. Citizenship follows the exercise of civil and political rights, whereas nationality does not necessarily carry with it the exercise of political rights. So again, let me read this last one. A person can be a citizen of a country and a national of another. So again, this relates to the differences more than anything in nationality. As it says that citizenship is based on the political community, right? It's not. Don't get stuck on democratic, because it's not just that, but it's based on the political status. Okay. Whereas nationality, it says, may carry with it, or it says nationality does not necessarily carry with it the exercise of political rights. Right. So again, this is based off of citizenship, or the state is what I'm really getting to. Because if you're not a part of the state, how can you exercise that nationality? You're not a part of the American government, then you can't exercise anything in the American system as an American would. Right? Et cetera, et cetera. Okay, in the last picture, I believe, citizenship by naturalization. The only privilege naturalized citizens do not have is being eligible to serve as president or vice president. Qualifications for citizenship. And this is based on the United States. Enter U.S. legally, be a good moral character, declare their support of the principles of American government and demonstrate knowledge of U.S. history and government, prove they can read, write, and speak English, go before a nation court and take an oath of allegiance to the United States. And it says to be denied, draft dodgers, military deserters, polygamists, anarchists, communists, or followers of any totalitarian system. So based off of what the United States denies or accepts is what's shown on the screen. So we can see that one of the things is moral character. Good moral character. Because if you're showing yourself to be a burden to the state, why would the state want to take you on? Right? Why would we do that? So especially as we're trying to develop as states, knowing that we only have so many people in Moroccan states willing to put in the work. As the executive director and the vice president expounded on thoroughly, that it's going to take some time, and it's going to take active hands, active Moors. This, by us, quote unquote, new Moors, right? It's going to be the new Moors that come through this and show everybody. That's what Noble Drali said, right? And just as the sister reiterated earlier, yet we're the ancients. But the thing is, we have to bypass all that spiritual stuff for a little second and realize, well, not even bypass, just see how it is in international law, because that's where everybody missed out on that. Right? The whole quote unquote soldier soul. Well, look at just solely. Let's look at the terms just solely or you solely. Right? Deals with the soul or the soul, or you being seen as a person in due time, right? Just a corpse, a corporation, right? And all that. So we got to study international law if we truly want to see any top tier divine spiritual concepts of anything going on here with the unwavering principle. What is that? International law. That's the unwavering principle. Okay. And I'll read this brief. I didn't know I put this here. Loss of citizenship, expatriation, give up the citizenship willingly, or denaturalization, to have citizenship taken. Okay. So I just wanted to expound on the difference between nationality and citizenship, because I know it'll be brought up in the future as it relates to why Moors may be denied their ability to proclaim nationality, right, or citizenship through a Moroccan state. So back to the VCLT, or the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties. Now I gather several points. Again, we'll have other or future discussions on this convention for a few weeks. But I like to build up on it. All right. So I'll just be reading the underlying points. If you would like to screenshot this or read anything else on the screen, feel free to do so. But I'm just going to read the underlying points and a little bit of the surrounding the underlying points. Okay, so it says approximately 10,000 treaties were in force in 1917. And the other underlying point, I'll start off with the sentence. It says the positive experience with those river regimes, and the growing awareness that some administrative tasks, in the view of the cross-border relevance, could not be dealt with by one state alone, let a number of international organizations come into existence, such as the International Telegraph Union and the International. Okay, so I just realized there's no need for me to read that. I underlined that for a whole nother point. I just realized. But so that was personal. But nonetheless, the underlying point at the top, approximately 10,000 treaties were in force in 1917. Again, this is just for just a little background in regards to where this Vienna Convention Law of Treaties commentary is coming from. Was talking about how previously there were 30,000 in number that they have counted throughout time, and that's just the ones that they've been able to count throughout time. Now, whether they've been entered into force and are able to use today is another story. But that gives us just a general number as to how many treaties are in force. All right, so if I can have a volunteer read this preamble. This is the preamble of the Vienna Convention Law on Treaties. Okay, so if
I read.
Volunteer. Okay,
I read.
All right, go ahead.
They say the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, done at Vienna on 23 May 1969. The states parties to the present convention, considering the fundamental role of treaties in the history of international relations, recognizing the ever-increasing importance of treaties as a source of international law and as a means of developing peaceful corporations among nations, whatever their constitutional or social system. Noting that the principles of free consent and of good faith in the Pacta Servanda
Servanda
rule are universally recognized, affirming that disputes concerning treaties, like other international disputes, should be settled by peaceful means and conformity with the principles of justice. It's hard for me to see. Hold on. For justice and international law, recalling the determination of peoples of the United Nations to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties can be maintained. Having in mind the principles of international law embodied in the Charter of the United Nations, such as the principles of the equal rights and self-determination of peoples, of the sovereign equality and the independence of all states, of non-interference in the domestic affairs of states, of the prohibition of the threat or use of force, and of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, believing that the qualifications in the progressive development of the law of treaties achieved in the present convention will promote the purposes of the United Nations set forth in the Charter, namely the maintenance of international peace and security, development of friendly relations, and the achievement of the cooperations among nations, affirming that the rules of customary international law will continue to govern questions not regulated by the provision of the present convention, have agreed as follows.
All right, thank you. So this is again the preamble of the VCLT. And just to go back up to the top where it says the states parties to the present convention, right? So this the states, right, who are the parties, considering the fundamental role of treaties in the history of international relations. Okay, so this is taking the fundamental role of treaties, the very basics of treaties. This is what this document speaks on, right? So again, this is one of the better documents, or the initiating documents, if you will, into statehood. This is a universal treaty. Okay, the VCLT is what's called a universal treaty, which means you don't have to try to accede to it or not. Regardless if you try to accede to it, you have to. If you plan on trying to exercise any treaty, you have to do this. So you don't have a choice but to do this. That's what makes it universal, because everybody has to do this. Okay. So again, this is the law on all treaties. It does not matter what treaty you're talking about. It'll even further speak on, if you catch it, the treaties that some of the Moorish Americans like to speak on that are not entered into force, such as it just slipped my mind to it's the treaties that Taj Tariq Bey teaches about a lot in relation to the Pope, what is it called? Somebody help me out here. I said so much it slipped my head. But any of the treaty, the secret treaty of Verona, that's one of them. The secret treaty of Verona, the secret, not the public treaty, not in the public. The secret treaty of Verona, which again is not entered into force. It's not a treaty that's exercised in international law. It's not, nobody acknowledges that treaty. So it's
a private treaty, not a public one. So therefore it has no force or recognition by any other state.
Exactly. And that was the wazir of New Mecca, Amir El.
I apologize for getting on late, but yes, you're right. Amir El.
Thank you for attending, brother. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, to talk about the secret treaty of Verona and other fear-mongering treaties is useless. Useless. Because all it does is keep you in an old mindset that no longer serves this reality. Okay, it doesn't matter how many or who all quote unquote policy enforcers, right, want this done, or how many popes or whatever still want to enact that. Because the truth of the reality is that 80 countries have been decolonized. So it doesn't seem like it's working too well. Right? So so this preamble, speaking on, if you want to know the foundational principles of treaties, then you need to come study the VCLT. Right? It also speaks on a maxim called Pacta Sunt Servanda. Okay, that's a maxim. You know, I more say, you know, what are the 10 maxims? Okay, Pacta Sunt Servanda is one maxim that's in the VCLT, the Vienna Convention Law on Treaties, in which it simply means promises must be kept. Okay, the promise or the agreements must be kept. Okay, so just to clarify for that, I know a lot of more say maxims and try to put a lot of, you know, weight on maxims, like de facto or de jure aren't two maxims. You know, maxim just means general statement. All right. So I'll briefly read where it says the third recital, or point 7. Okay. Third recital. Now, this is from the Vienna Convention Law and Treaty. What I'm reading from is it'll give references in the parentheses, but this is speaking on the preamble. So what this book does is it'll speak on a section or the preamble, then it'll break down certain words in that preamble or in that article or in that section. Okay, so the third recital: free consent, good faith, and pacta sunt servanda. The third recital refers to the major pillars of the law, while Article 26 seizes on both the principles of good faith and pacta sunt servanda, or the agreements being kept. Right, the principle of free consent underlies the convention as a whole, even though special emphasis is placed in Articles 34, 48, 49, 51, and 52. In addition, The preamble's reference to the principle of free consent impacts on the interruption of Article 53, especially on the question whether just cogents or use cogents has the authority to bind against their will. Article or fourth recital, in which I won't read in its entirety, but fourth recital, peaceful settlement of disputes. It is a commonplace that disputes over the application and interpretation of treaties should, like all other international disputes, be settled by peaceful means, or the fourth recital. For the specific purpose of the convention, this duty is given a definite form in Articles 65 through 68 in cases of disputes concerning the invalidity or termination, withdrawn form, or suspension of a treaty. Okay, so this commentary book really all the commentary books that I've come across, or most of them, I should say, are very good books or sources to study when trying. If somebody can mute themselves, it seems like they came off a mute. The commentaries are good books to learn from, to learn how to cross-reference. Okay, that's half the reason why we're reading this book, but I wanted to read more so in regards to Pacta Sunt Servanda, as in good faith, as those are two terms that some of us are now familiar with, especially good faith. And just to expound on the good faith, that's mainly what we relied on in ancient times, establishing treaties. As international law became more specific, more detailed, it wasn't just more so relied on good faith. Eventually, maxims such as Pacta Sunt Servanda came, right? In which it's saying agreements must be kept. Now, if we just, generally thinking about it, agreements must be kept. Well, you would think if somebody's saying that, then it was probably a time that where agreements weren't kept. Or nonetheless, at least two sides to this coin. So, what I'm getting down to before I share another picture here is that we're Moors, or Moorish Americans, I should say, even though that's not an actual nationality or a recognized nationality, where Moorish Americans are mentally stuck at is in the ancient way of thinking. Just relying on the good faith, just relying on the ancient way of how the Moroccan government used to be ran. So this is in relation to the flag of the Kingdom of Morocco, right? How some Moors can't seem to give that up, knowing that it's not our flag. It's the Kingdom of Morocco's flag that they have claimed in their state constitution as a part of their state. Why did they do that? Well, I can tell you one reason: because nobody else did it. That's one reason why nobody else did it. And when you put certain verbiage in the Constitution, in the state constitution, this is now what constitutes your state, your state. So we know that the state constitution for the Kingdom of Morocco doesn't apply for this landmass. Kingdom of Morocco is not over here. It's in Africa. So, and, a lot of Moors try to, and even when I mention that point, hey, well, Africa is still the Moroccan Empire, and South America is still the Moroccan Empire, and such, right? Now again, there's truth in that, but there's a lot of still misinformation lingering out there that a lot of Moorish Americans are pumping up, and it needs to be corrected by international law. So let's continue. Some other screenshots here. Now, this is speaking on Article 1, in which, let's see, I should have brought it up. But this is speaking on Article 1. And the underlying points, I'll just read the underlying points. It says, a state is a member of the community of nations. Okay. The other underlying point, well, I'll just read the entire sentence. It says, enhancing Brearley's developing findings, and Brearley is a person, his successor, Senior Luterpacht, removed the term international organization and replaced it with organization of states, in order to point out that states only acting either individually or in association are the normal subjects of international law. Okay. And then it goes down to say that it was Senior Waldelock who finally proposed in 1965 to limit the scope of the convention to treaties concluded between states. Okay, so discussions, both in the League of Nations and the United Nations, were held, and this commentary brings up different people that had a different play in an international arena. Okay, so it read that a state is a member of the community of nations, right? So if we want to be at the table of the nations of men, right, what do we need? A state. Okay, so it further expounded that, that Senior Luterpacht removed the term international organizations and replaced it with organization of states. Now, this is in relation to something that he was writing, but also something that is based on international law and how it developed. Okay, his findings is in relation to international law being developed. Okay, so at one point in time, statehood as we know it today was not always statehood. It grew into what we know it as today. Why? Well, another thing that the Moorish Americans will have to understand is that it was the Moroccan government that subdued or suppressed the European nations so much, so hard, so severely, many different ways, that it caused them to basically come together. So when you look at the history of international law and how it began, sometimes it'll, depending on a certain part, 1648 and whatnot, excuse me, different years, it'll speak on the Westphalia, it'll speak on the European nations, in which that's where the core of modern international law has stemmed from. Us suppressing Europe and forcing them to come together and work together, just as we are today. Okay, in the de jure fashion. So the organization of states and international organizations, for one, is not the same. I do want to put that out there. International organizations, such as the Moorish Science Temple of America or any organization that's controlled by a state, is what's known as an international organization. While states are organizations of governments. Okay, it's just the people organized in a certain way to govern themselves, but it itself is not a organization. I realize that a lot of Moorish Americans are referencing Moroccan states as organizations, simultaneously saying states. Okay, but they have to understand that if you're calling something an organization, then you're not calling it a state. Okay, and if you're calling something a state, then you're not calling it an organization. So this is just some of the basic verbiage, right, that Moors have to understand, or else you'll be just cross-referencing, or you'll just be saying, truth mixed with falsehood every sentence and unaware of it. So which would just lead to confusion. So, and it also said the states are the normal subjects of international law. So again, this VCLT, Vienna Convention Law and Treaties, is building up as to why states are the normal subjects and not persons, not individuals, right? Not organizations, but states. Okay, that's who can go to the ICJ. They only listen to states, not stateless people, not people who want to go against statehood. They don't listen to those people, not people who want to storm the United Nations doors without a state government and elected officials. You can look up things that may happen to people who do such a thing, in which there are several things that can happen, based off of what other people tried to do in history, right? You can just simply look that up. But I will tell you that, security is important, especially to the United Nations, right? Self-determination is also important. But it's only important, when I say they, the United Nations only see that it's important to you if you have a state. Because other than that, you're stateless. Okay. So let's continue with this next picture here. Now I'm going to start off reading right here where it says upon closer examination. Okay. Upon closer examination, however, the determination of sovereignty and statehood can be neglected in the context of Article 1, since the issue is actually resolved by Article 81. Accession to the VCLT is dependent upon the outcome of the UN's admission process, Article 4 of the UN Charter, or the decision on membership taken by the specialized agencies and international organizations mentioned in Article 81, so-called the Vienna Formula. As an example, in this regard, the Holy See, a member of the various UN specialized agencies, has been party to the VCLT since 1969. The Holy See is a subject of international law, but does not fit comfortably within the criteria for statehood. Okay, so the Holy See and other organizations that's like it, they give rise to a lot of Moorish Americans, further instilling thoughts such as the United or the Illuminati, quote unquote, running the United Nations, the Pope coming in and doing this and this and that, running the United Nations and all that, in which this point that I have underlined, the Holy See is the subject of international law, but does not fit comfortably within the criteria for statehood. Okay. Well, let's think about this in a more intimate perspective. The United States, we deal with every day, right, is a corporation that's seen as a state, right? A corporation pretending to be a de jure state called the United States of America. So they're out of line, right? They're outlaws, out of law. They're outlaws. Who are seen as in-laws or people who are states or actual state. Now, another territory that's like this, in a sense, is Canada. They have yet to meet certain requirements, right, to be established as a state, a de jure state, yet they're seen as a state. So even though they might, quote unquote, not fit comfortably within the criteria for statehood, they're seen as states. Okay, why is this? Well, for us in our situation on this landmass, dealing with the United States, it has already been decided since 1952 that the only people that can do something about our situation and decolonizing, right? That's the whole name of the game, decolonizing. The only people that can do something about it is us as Moroccans, not as a Moorish American, not as American, because that's who the colonizers are. And I'll say this in every video, the 13 colonies or the colonists simply changed their name to the United States of America. So who are the colonists? The Americans. And the name of the game is to decolonize. So once decolonization happens, you attaching yourself to American, whether it's Native American, American Indian, Moorish American, Italian American, it means no difference. Should no longer be. Okay, so since the only people that can do something about it is us, and according to international law, specifically France versus United States of America court case, that we need Moroccan authorities in a consular court, and in that way only can we begin to start decolonization. Well, what is a consular court a part of? The judicial branch. What is the judicial branch a part of? A state. or elected officials. So the corporation of the United States will not go anywhere by continuing certain little processes to try to discharge a debt, right? Try to win a little court case, a domestic court case, try to not pay child support. Yeah, that's good for individuals' lives, but guess what? That'll only leave room for another court case decided in international law XYZ years from now to say, hey, more subjects. Guess what? Things change again, and you're still under the jurisdiction of the United States of America. And guess how they're doing things? A little different than how they do it before. So you got a little bit more hamster wheels to find. That's all it is. If you're not talking decolonization, you're just talking about ways to keep them here so they can further stall, deny, and defend. While they give all the quote unquote Moorish Americans ways to uplift their lives as an individual, not uplift and fall in humanity or human rights. So you can do all of that stuff, win a case, get a little piece of land, not pay your debt, right? They created this stuff on purpose within the system of the United States to further entice the Moorish Americans away from statehood. Because all that other stuff is exactly what's going to keep them here. Exactly. They're not worried about what the Moorish Americans are sending in. They'll gladly approve it, even if that one individual beats that case. Well, they need Moorish Americans to stay in that loophole for them to survive. Because if not, you'll have Moors figuring it out. The truth. So, and I'm sticking on this point for a second because I understand that Moors are looking for a solution right now. I understand that. I understand that you may be going through some hard times. We all are. I understand that. I truly do. But one thing that must be understood is that when you're talking about the right now, you're talking about reactionary off the right now, you're talking about checkers. Okay, you're talking about not studying international law if you're talking like that. Because there's only so much that can be understood and done as of right now, especially since we haven't taken him to court yet and decisions haven't been made, right? Did somebody have something to say? Okay, if everyone can just mute their mics, unless you have a question or a comment, I appreciate that. All right. So when it comes to these hamster wheels, again, that a lot of Moors, are often offering services for, to discharge debt, to how to not pay rent, all these types of stuff. Again, follow what the treaties say. Just follow what the treaties say. Why? Because those are the supreme law of the land, not whoever's little idea that you're getting this information from. That's them in their process, in which, honestly, the more Moors you come across, you'll realize that it's a new process for each person. Everybody's doing it their own way. It's always something a little different. So that should tell you something. Let's continue. So and we'll be we haven't gotten anywhere as close as I thought we were going to get. But we'll continue for a little bit, and then open up the floor for any questions or comments. So Article 2, which is stated above, for the purpose of the present convention, and then we have several points, in which I'll just read the underline. Treaty means an international agreement in a written form concluded between states and governed by international law, whether embodied in a single instrument or in two or more related instruments, and whatever its particular designation. Okay, so a treaty is between two states, right? And it's governed by international law, meaning that if a Moorish American was to say they are exercising a treaty simply because they mention it in their paperwork and they actually found remedy in their case, and now they think it's because of the treaty, but it's actually because of how all the other ways they set themselves up in the United States system, right? Such as the Articles of Incorporation or Articles of Organization. You know, some Moors create the Articles of an Organization so they can do business as an organization, right? The Moorish straw man, or the Moorish subject, excuse me, that some people call the straw man, is a corporation, right? Okay, well, if the United States is a corporation, what Noble Drew Ali brought was basically a way to say, hey, at least we can do is fight corporation with corporation. Now, it might not be the best way, it might not be the right way, it might not be the top tier way. That's why the third and fourth generation is going to get it. But the least we can do at that time is fight corporation with corporation. What else did he do? He shrouded around religion. So what did he bring? Okay, he's bringing this divine side, because to bring the national side, remember, it's a divine and national movement. Okay, and national. To be a national, you got to pledge allegiance to a state, and we don't want to pledge allegiance to the colonizer state. Democratic or Republican, it makes no difference. We don't want to pledge of allegiance to the colonizer state. Okay, so what did Noble Drew Ali do? He established a corporation within a corporation that's acting like a state, a de jure state. Okay, to say that at least up until this point, until the third and fourth generations come, or to the Moors figure it out, that's the least we could have been doing. But Moors got stuck in that. Moors got stuck. It's governed, the treaties are governed by international law. So what does international law say? Well, this convention, that's a source of international law, tells people how to govern any treaty that they would like to, or how to exercise any treaty that they would like to exercise, but not as individuals. You got to have a state first and foremost, or be a part of a state. Okay. So B says ratification, acceptance, approval, and accession mean in each case the international act so named whereby a state establishes on the international plane its consent to be bound by a treaty. So acceding to treaties is what gives you consent to be bound by a treaty. That's what binds you to a treaty, when you accede to it. Now, obviously, it says a state establishes this. So first and foremost, you have to create a state before you accede to treaties, right? But what actually binds you to a treaty is you ratifying it. Excuse me. Which again is the same yet slightly different than acceding. But nonetheless, you must accede to the treaties. You must ratify public laws in which the several Moroccan states have done based on these treaties. Okay, you must accept it. Okay. Point C says full powers means a document emanating from the competent authority of a state designating a person or persons to represent the state for negotiating, adopting, or authenticating the text of a treaty for expressing of consent of the state to be bound by a treaty, or for accomplishing any other act with respect to a treaty. Okay, so full powers, right? You have full powers in international law when you begin to create emanating documents from a competent authority of the state. So when the state itself begins to produce documents that allows people to say, hey, this is what Moroccan state I'm a part of. That is full powers. You have invoked your powers. This spiritual stuff, we gotta water this, we gotta realize or actualize our powers. It doesn't come by way of what we probably thought it was for the last umpteen years. Yes, that may help to some degree, but in all reality, the unwavering truth, dealing with the unwavering principle and keeping it simple is all by way of starting state and following international law. You know, because I can tell you this, that when December 21st, 2012 or whatever, or 2021, when everybody was talking about, you know, my powers, all that, I bet you nobody was talking about full powers of international law. But that's how much space cadet type of time they got us on. They want people to steer away from international law. How many movies have you seen, especially the newer ones, are coming out more and more, and they're starting to look like the ancients are at the seats of the United Nations and things like that. Well, it's starting to become pretty trendy. They're trying to throw a hint at you. Okay, we have to deal with actual reality. Okay, that means even talking about the ugly and even, you know, any which way that you feel that this may not work, okay, let's talk about that too. Okay, so this full powers, again, is all based on an emanating document such as a Moroccan state ID, such as consular court orders from a Moroccan state government, right? All these are documents coming from a state government, right? The competent authority. Okay, in which the word competent will also probably not tonight, but the word competent, it also breaks down what competent means. Now, we're not talking about just some willy-nilly general conversation. We're talking about strictly international law verbiage. No longer say things like, hey, my state is state of mind. My state of mind is Islam and Allah. No. We're talking about the grounded reality of you having a state and being a part of a state. Okay. So competent, just for the record, is in relation to, or it means being the representative of the authority or the state. That's what shows that you're competent. Not just saying that I'm a Moor by blood and hey, I know some history that you as a quote unquote American might not know, even though they themselves are seen as Americans, the Moorish Americans. So history has to line up with law, the unwavering part of it. Because in history, there's a lot of opinions. A lot of Europeans wrote different books and what this happened. And there's a lot of different maps. It's 50 different names for this one little section in quote unquote Indiana, right? It's 50 different names according to the maps for this section. For every other Moor, it's a different name for it. But we got to stick with the unwavering truth, the irrefutable truth. Okay. I'll skip down to point G. It says party means a state which has consent to be bound by a treaty and for which the treaty is in force. And then it says H. A third state means a state not a party to the treaty. Okay. So the Moroccan states are not states that have been a party to the treaty. Who's a party to the treaty? Well, it's only two parties with the treaty I'm talking about, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Right, that's one of the Moroccan treaties. Who are the two parties? Well, the Sultan of Morocco, who represented the Moroccan government, right? He was the competent authority for the Moroccan government, while the other party were the Americans, or the United States of America. Okay, two separate parties, two separate jurisdictions, two separate nationalities, two separate governments on one landmass. Okay, that's where the confusion comes in at, because on no other place in the world will you see the colonizer having rights stemming from the same landmass that the indigenous people do. Generally, it's things like, France colonized Haiti. Well, we know where France is and we know where Haiti is, but there's nothing to say, hey, well, France has a treaty in relation to the same landmass as the Americans or the Haitians. So one moment here. So the third state party is what the Moroccan states are. As you see, the two terms, putting them together, being that party means a state which has consent to be bound by the treaty, right? So we have consent to be bound to the several Moroccan treaties. How do we have consent? Well, we acceded to it. It's the treaties that give us rise and ability to enforce them as long as we have states, right? So we're third state parties, right? So these are just a few points from Article 2, just Article 2, that more should get familiar with. This is the verbiage at the basics, because these are the status, the definitions in which that when you are starting a state, this is what you want to know. Because just in this on this page alone, it already speaks on so much of your first few steps. Right? So it's important to study these treaties, especially in a chronological order. I mean, study them. Right? So it goes to say here, this is based on Article 2, talking about the historical background in negotiating history. It says the first attempts to determine the common understanding of the term international treaty were comparatively recent. In 1753, Amir de Vattel put down quite a modern perception. A treaty in Latin, fetus, is a compact entered into by sovereigns for the welfare of the state, either in perpetuity or for a considerable length of time. Treaties can only be entered into the highest state authorities by sovereigns who contract in the name of the state. Okay, so again, it's entered by the sovereign, which is the state. So only states can make treaties. Okay. And we can further read at the bottom. It says the designation in international practice within the realm of international relations, the variety of nomenclature for an agreement is manifold and thus confusing. Apart from treaty, one finds titles such as accord, act, convention, covenant, charter, declaration, pact, protocol, statute, modus vivendi, memorandum of understanding, exchange, exchange of notes or letters, joint communique or communique, and agreement minute. The specific designation, and seldom randomly selected by the participating parties. Terms such as exchange of letters indicate, contrary to covenant, the less formal character of the agreement. The title declaration may suggest that no legally binding effect is intended. Nonetheless, one must be extremely careful when assessing the status of an instrument solely based on this title. The provisions of the agreement, the particular circumstances in which it is drawn up, as well as the intention of the parties, may disprove the prima facie suggestion communicated by the designation. Okay, so just starting back up at the top, let me see how many. Okay, we have a few pictures. Okay, well, we'll see how far I can get with this. I'll try not to make it too long. Then we'll open up for question and answer, questions and comments. So it says again at the top, apart from treaty, one finds titles such as the following. Right. So this section though I don't have it in the screen as an entirety, speaks on how these other terms are synonymous. Okay, they're synonymous with treaty in international law, whereas on a state level, right, it's different. Okay, so in international law, you might see things such as the Charter of the United Nations, right? Charter. Or you might see the Act of Algeciras, right? The Act of Algeciras. You might see the Convention on the Law of Treaties, like we're speaking about, the Convention on the Law of Treaties, right? Or the statutes of the ICJ, right? All these are considered treaties in international law. Okay, so don't confuse the dominions of the verbiage of these terms on an international plane opposed to what it looks like on a state level for the individual state. Okay, so treaty again is synonymous with act, convention, covenant, charter, declaration, etc. Okay, so some of us might not be aware, but the term covenant, right? The term covenant is synonymous with treaty, right? Covenant is in the Bible. Okay, so now you can see how law is everywhere. Once you start to break down international law, right? A covenant, oh, thank you. I appreciate it. A covenant, right, is known as God's promise to the people. And we all, well, some of us might know, being that I was raised as a Christian, I'm familiar with the term covenant and how the church thinks in relation to that. So understanding that, and then coming into international law, right? It's clear that God's promise, based off of things never happening again and whatnot, is all based on the covenant, i.e., treaties. And this is where the Moors on this landmass come into play to uplift the covenants that give us rise to be who we are, right? The treaties, right? So it's time to remember, actualize this, not be space cadets, right? Let's stick with the exact verbiage on the screen here. So it's time to actualize this by exercising what it says in the treaties. Okay. Okay, so we'll read this next point. It says number of parties. By using the plural of state, Article 2, Paragraph 1 literature, A indicates that at least 2 states must be parties to a treaty as defined. The plurality of participants seem to be a matter of course since the major characteristic of a treaty is its consensual nature. So far, the definition embraces bilateral agreements as well as multilateral treaties while excluding unilateral declarations. Okay, excluding that. It goes to say the fundamental characteristic of a unilateral declaration or act is its emanation from a single side. No previous participation and or subsequent acceptance of a third party is required in order to create a legal obligation for the author. In short, a unilateral declaration is an act of auto limitation, okay, auto limitation within the sphere of international law. Its unilateral nature, as well as its legally binding character, has to be judged primarily by the intention of the author and unveiled by examining the structure, the object, and the consent of the announcement, the circumstances in which it was declared, as well as the reactions it may have prompted. Okay. If a plurality of states act collectively or jointly, like-minded states, and as much as they do not to intend to regulate their mutual relations, these acts are unilaterally in nature or unilateral in nature. The thin line between a unilateral declaration and or oral agreement between the author of the declaration and its addressee is somewhat diffuse, in particular when the declaration is made on the specific request of the addressee. This being said, tacit acceptance by the addressee would not deprive the preceding declaration of its unilateral character. If the declaration, judged on its own, creates legally binding obligations for the author based on good faith. So I wanted to bring this up because one of the things that has recently been done as of October 14th, 2023, was that a new flag for the Moroccan Empire was revealed. It's similar to the Kingdom of Morocco flags, except it has two green stripes outlined in black, which have their own symbolic representation of international law and Moroccan law, right? A lot of Moorish Americans didn't agree with that, right? But I wanted to bring up this section. Again, this is still on Article 2, right? This is all what Article 2 talks about. I wanted to bring up this section because it discusses a unilateral declaration in which, in regards to the Kingdom of Morocco, a unilateral decision was made by them to utilize what was commonly known as the Moroccan Empire flag as their state flag. Now, what allowed them to do this lawfully, legally, right? What allowed them to do this? Well, documentation beats conversation any time of the day. So what documentation said that they couldn't do that? There was no documentation saying that they could not make the empire flag their state flag. Now, even though we know that in the Act of Algeciras, it says that states need constitutions, right? In Article 121, it says states need constitutions, right? So we know that since 1906, nonetheless, we should have had states with state constitutions. But the unilateral decision came when? Well, it came when the Kingdom of Morocco decided to use the flag, right, on for their state and for their state only. not outside of those boundaries, known as the Kingdom of Morocco. Okay, so let's read the beginning right quick again, where it
On
says
the
the
previous,
fundamental. Yeah,
and I just want to point out that term unilateral, unilateral, bilateral, multilateral. Those terms, whenever you see them wherever, you just an indication they're speaking about a treaty. It's international law with that idea.
yeah. And more in relation to this, the term unilateral, starting off at the top, the highlighted section, it says the fundamental characteristic of a unilateral declaration or act is its emanation from a single side, no previous participation and or subsequent acceptance of a third party is required in order to create a legal obligation for the author. In short, a unilateral declaration is an act of auto limitation within the sphere of international law. This auto limitation word, okay, automatically limits, right? Auto limitation is all about exactly what the Kingdom of Morocco did when the Sultan demoted himself or devalued himself into the seat of office as a king. Okay, you set forth auto limitation upon the state once that is done. Once you make something confined, right, for whatever reason, auto limitation is then established. Okay. So we'll read more about auto limitation in the future classes, future study sessions. We'll get through these last two here. The highlighted section, it says, well, I'll start off with the sentence. Unlike the Harvard Draft Convention on the Law of Treaties, the VCLT, or the Vienna Convention Law of Treaties, leaves it to the contracting parties to decide on the formal or informal appearance of the understanding. Hence, exchanges of letters, communiques, notes, or telegrams, processes verbal, as well as minutes and memoranda, are proper instruments to record an agreement. Okay, so again, this is all about exercising treaty properly, in which that the proper instrument must be recorded, right? I went back and took a screenshot of this and saved it because the other day I seen that a Moor who agrees with the conventions and the treaties of the United Nations, such as the Charter, the Montevideo Convention, etc., but did not understand that other people were needed to be a part of a state, specifically other people outside of his family, as he was under the impression that your family members can be the ones to start the state, regardless of the age and whatnot. And this is just one of the Moorish American concepts in which that still has to be cut. You got to cut that cord. As some Moorish Americans think that, government is all about your family. You got to have the family, or the house has to be in order and all this stuff. They think they're talking about actually, who's in your house and whatnot. But in truth, that can't be the case. Otherwise, we're talking about monarchies and even dictators, if you know, depending on where you're coming from. So the only reason I pretty much put this picture in tonight's study session was solely for those types of mental concepts or perceptions, that the proper instruments must be recorded, for one, right, from the Moor who is trying to establish a treaty, as he initiated on social media. He said he was trying to establish a treaty with the several Moroccan states that are established right now, but it was only himself, you see. So or let alone his family, right? So these are just some of the concepts that we got to climb out of, okay? And the last picture here, before we close out, it says, I'll start from the top. Treaties must be governed by international law in order to fall within the scope of the convention. The phrase denotes the body of law applicable, i.e. all sources enumerated in Article 38 of the ICJ statutes, which I believe is about customary law. But it says, when executing and interpreting the treaty, example, all questions relating to the validity, binding force, effect, application, and termination, and the body of law to be used with the resolving, when resolving any treaty-related dispute, example, the law of state responsibility. The requirements serves to distinguish between international law agreements, international agreements regulated by public international law, and those which, although concluded between states, are regulated by the national law of one of the parties or by some national law system chosen by the parties by virtue of the choice of law clause or proper law. Okay. So again, it's talking about distinguishing the requirements on an international plane with these international agreements for public law, right? So no secret treaty, right? Or none of that. And it goes to say that as a rule, the legal system which provides the agreement with binding force is not necessarily identical to the legal system chosen to govern themselves of the agreement. So in a state, in an individual state, and then in international law, two things, or one thing, such as, let's just use this for example, the term treaty, as we mentioned earlier, how in international law, treaty means convention, it means act, it means declaration, it means charter, etc. But on a state level, that's not the case, right? So speaking on this same type of time, when it says more about what I'm about to read, and I'll start over here, it says, as a rule, the legal system which provides the agreement with binding force is not necessarily identical to the legal system chosen to govern the provisions of this agreement. To come within the definition of treaty and accordingly within the scope of the VCLT, however, interstate treaties must be binding under international law and at least partly subjected to international law. When drafting Article 2, Paragraph 1, Literature A, the ILC discussed whether the phrase intended to be governed by international law would be preferable in order to indicate that the proper law of an agreement depends on the will of the parties alone. The ILC's final decision to abandon the words intended to be was based on the presumption that the phrase governed by international law embraces the intent relating thereto. Okay, so this last part at the bottom was all about the understanding of the term binding force, right? Well, actually, this whole page was more about the understanding of the term binding force, right? As we already spoke about how accessions give us the consent to bind the treaties, right? This talked more about the binding force, in which that it gave us indication that on an international plane, opposed to a state level, right, an individual state level, may be different. Okay, let's just say let's just say three states all accede to the Convention on Genocide, right? The punishment and prevention on genocide, right? Okay, well, those three states that acceded to that one treaty, yes, it does mean that they can make laws in regards to that treaty, right? As long as it correlates. But that doesn't mean that all of their laws will look the same or expound on the same thing. So there might be, let's just say, one state government that says, okay, this punishment and prevention on genocide, right? For us as Moors on this landmass, let's just put it in our situation. For us as Moors on this landmass, acceding to that one treaty on genocide, well, of course, we have to figure out why we're even acceding to the treaty in the first place, right? Give exercise to the points of intention, in which that we have to put a stop to genocide first and foremost. Okay, well, what does that look like for this landmass? And one of the many ways that genocide is being exercised is by way of denationalization. Okay, denationalization. Now, it is up to any state that has acceded to that Convention on Genocide to say what genocide actually means. It's up to that state. Now, for us, if we read the Convention on Genocide and it says this is what genocide means, and it gives us so many points, right? And we see that uh, basically causing mental harm, and I'm paraphrasing, causing mental harm, trying to insist or trying to get rid of a certain group or a certain people. This is genocide. Now, how can you do this? By erasing them out of history. Well, how can you do this? Denationalizing. Right? That's what the Americans were trying to do when they say, hey, just call yourself American. It doesn't matter if you're Moroccan. We want you to think you're American. Right? So social engineering gets people to think they're Americans instead of Moroccans. And then you got a group of Moors, right? Moors by blood, Americans in the political status. A group of Moors saying, hey, we're Moorish Americans. They're calling you a type. So they're calling Moroccans Americans. That's denationalizing, right? When you try to get one nationality to be another nationality, you're denationalizing. Okay. So being that the oppressor has oppressed the people until the oppressed oppress themselves, and so us focusing on the problem or pointing the finger back at us, right? point the finger back at yourself, right? For those who are familiar with, the spiritual, the quote unquote great work, you know what I'm talking about. You always got to point the finger back to self. Okay, so when we go hard on these Moorish Americans, it's because the oppressed has oppressed the people until the oppressed oppresses themselves. The oppressor, quote unquote, no longer has to do anything. Right? It's on automaton. Right? It's always the person next to you. What is that? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Well, it's starting to look like it's one and the same. Right? So this inside job, if you will, being that it could be the most confusing job, right? To know who we are, to stop getting us to think that we're Moorish Americans and why we're Moroccans. That's an inside job, right? Then you got to make it an outside job, aka public. Put it on the public law, right? By proclaiming through a state government. That's the only way you can proclaim nationality, through a state government. That's the only way you can proclaim nationality, through a state government. Right? That's the only way. So as we conclude here, this Vienna Convention Law and Treaties, it'll break down a lot of the foundational perspectives for the Moors who are coming into statehood. I do encourage you all to study this convention, as well as the United Nations Charter, as well as the several or the two conventions that the WRC has produced as of this moment, which is the RSCC, or the Statutes of the Regional Supreme Court, and the Convention of the Wazir Regional Council, in which I call the WRCC for short. I encourage all Moors to study those documents, if you have them, especially. They're again, they're breaking down the foundational mindset that Moors should have, because, and I will say this before we conclude, outside of AMPAC's study sessions, you will not find international law as it pertains to Moroccans anywhere on earth. And I'm talking about nowhere, from nobody, nowhere on earth can you find information for the people, for the people's liberation, known as Moroccans. You cannot find this information anywhere else on earth. I promise you that. I promise you that. I put my last dollar on that. And that's why it's so important to study AMPAC study sessions, because for one, it's a story that's being told. Okay. I'm the Prime Minister of Meru State Republic. Okay. Yes, we have our videos on YouTube. Okay. But they are nowhere near they are nowhere near AMPAC study session when it comes to the poise, the alignment. It's a story. Like I said, it's a story being told. You can't just start in the middle, can't start in the end, think you're gonna get it. No, look, it's like starting in the middle as far as the Moorish American thing, and you never started at the beginning talking about you got to establish a state. You start in the middle, you're just gonna play yourself. I'm trying to tell you, start at the beginning and do yourself a great service. All right. So with that, I'll yield the floor to any other questions or comments. I don't want to take up too much time of me just rambling on, but So I yield the floor to any questions or comments here before we close out.
Point of privilege.
Yes.
Thank you for that discourse. It's very enlightening. And I had my eye on that Vienna. There were two words that I underlined. Unwavering and indisputable truths. So in my journey, doing more science, I played with several of the remedies out there, and those remedies are hit and miss. You win some, you lose some. You playing their game, and you ain't gonna play it better than them because they wrote that. But some more are like Anansi, they're trickster characters, and their erudition on jurisprudence can allow them to weave, but even they do not. Even they are hit and miss, and so messing with those remedies to me were like hitchhiking, and sometimes you get a ride, sometimes you don't, But when I came into, when I first heard about statehood and the international treaties, it was coming into a realm of more than chance, but imminent possibilities. And, right and exact. It was it's like riding on a train and just sitting back and enjoying all the scenery and the beauty of the land, which are the treaties and the declarations and the conventions and the charters that are all spelling the principles, of our ancestors. And I think it's well stated to say it's unwavering and indisputable truth. It feels right. It feels good. All the people that are teaching it on any level, of course, the AMPAC study sessions, like you say, they are poised, and they are um, very entertaining to watch, and they unveil it, the knowledge, in a way that it's like a scrumptious meal. But everybody that I've listened to that are propagating the treaties and statehood still ring with an authenticity that really feels right and feels good. With that, I yield. That's my comment. I yield.
Islam. All right. Is there any other comments or questions before we close out here?
Greetings, everyone. This is Tria representing the territory of Wisconsin. Very new to the statehood movement. And I just had one, maybe two questions. One, so I'm very familiar with AMPAC and what that stands for. That's for Colorado. Same thing with AMPAG being for Georgia, and then AMPAM being for Michigan. Meru State Republic, what territory is that? Or I should say, what United States corporation territory are you replacing? Same thing with Dempsey, and what does that stand for? I yield.
Yeah. Well, I'll just go down the list briefly, since there's only 7 recognized Moroccan states as of right now, and a few are coming through the pipeline. So there's of course ANPAC, Ante Colorado being the first. The second state was New Mecca, or Allodium Morse Pradium New Mecca. The third state is Ante Georgia, ANPAG. The fourth state is us, Meru State Republic, that's reclaiming the territory commonly known as Indiana. The fifth was ANPAM. Six was DEMT, or I always struggle with DEMT.
Demetrius.
Yeah, right. And that's reclaiming the Texas territory. And then the seventh state, as of right now, is Skaroo, which has reclaimed the territory of North Carolina.
Islam War. Let me let them know that Allodium Morse Palladium of New Mecca has reclaimed the state of Oregon. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes. So are there any other questions or comments at this time? I know you said you had another question. Ms. Tria.
Yes, sir. It was kind of like a two-part, and you pretty much answered it. One was, what the newly recognized Moroccan statehoods are versus what territories they're reclaiming, and then two, the order in which they were established. That was going to be my part two, and you did that. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. All right, how about anybody else? Is there any other comments or questions?
Islam. I'm from the territory that's will formerly be known as Alabama, and I just want to say thanks for this Zoom call, because it was a lot of information that was answered that I think me and a lot of other people in my territory, as far as our jurisdiction, was trying to figure out as far as questions. So I just want to say thank you all for this Zoom. It was really informative.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for attending. Was it Shalette? Who was that, Shalette?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, it's all love. Right, are there any other questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Brother Kill,
Somebody need to put themselves on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to just also thank you for having this this chat, because it's truly enlightening that you all, doing your due diligence where all the other so-called Moorish Americans with the various organizations have failed. So I certainly appreciate that, even though I'm a Lone Ranger in Missouri, except for a couple other people that were on the call before. So this is very, very informative, and hopefully that, more so-called Moorish Americans can really see the light at the end of the tunnel on this paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
And I'll talk to you later on, and as we discussed the possibility of relocating. So it was a couple other questions I have for you, but I'll ask at a later time, and I yield.
Okay. Well, how about this? I'll contact you after this meeting.
Okay. That'll work. Yeah, when the time is, yes. Islam.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments before we close out?
I have a question.
Okay.
In regards to tonight's recording, are you going to make it available at any time?
Yes, it will be. I know that it will be on Meru State Republic's state channel. Um, uh, I'm not sure about the other heads of state, where they plan on placing it, whether it may be the state channel or website or what have you. But I can tell you that you can find it. You will be able to find it on Meru State Republic's state channel. All right.
Okay. And Meru, is that Michigan?
No, that's Meru State Republic is the government that the prime minister of that has reclaimed the territory of Indiana. You can just type in Meru State Republic in YouTube, and
Okay.
you'll see the page pop up.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so are there any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. So I do thank you all for attending tonight's study session. It was a beautiful build. We got through a lot of basics, even though we only got to Article 2. So nonetheless, this I at least tried to get through at least this for tonight. So we'll start off with the VCLT in the next meeting, as well as some other points that it may or may not be in relation to the VCLT. But I look forward to hearing from you all again. Again, this link is a reoccurring link, so you can save this as far as and I'll use the same flyer over and over, just use a different date. Okay, so as long as you save the link, you'll still have access to the future meetings. All right. With that, I thank you all for coming, and we'll conclude here for this meeting. All right. Islam, and thank you all.
Islam,
Peace and love, everybody.
Peace and love.